Great.
All right, everybody. Sorry for the little glitches there, but thank you so much for joining us tonight for our presentation called Shining Light on ASD and Essential Supports. I'm Sharon Blackman. I'm the Director of Training for Families Helping Families of Greater New Orleans. And today's presentation is one of over 100 of these kinds of training opportunities that are brought to you each year by Families Helping Families of Greater New Orleans, and they're all completely free of charge. My co-host tonight is Cynthia Chesterfield from Families Helping Families of Greater Baton Rouge. Thank you, Cynthia, and all of our friends at Greater Baton Rouge for helping us to get the word out about today's presentation. So before we get started, I got a few little housekeeping things to mention. Um, you will be receiving a copy of the slide deck along with any other resources that the speakers tell you that they're going to send. I'll get those and I'll send those out to you in a follow-up email. We will have question and answer time at the end, so you can put that either in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll make sure that we get to those. They're going to go on through the information, though, because they may answer your questions before it's over, so they'll probably just take the questions at the end. I will also drop a little link to a feedback survey in the chat box in a little while. Please click on that and give us your feedback on today's presentation. That keeps our funders happy, keeps these things free, and it also gives you the opportunity, if you need a certificate of attendance, you can request that in that little link. All right, so our speakers tonight are Tracy O'Donnell and Melinda Luna from Lassard. I'm going to let them introduce themselves further if they'd like. But ladies, thank you so much for joining us and for spending a Tuesday evening with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Sharon. Okay, well, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and just get started. Welcome to the ABCs of ASD, presented by myself and Melinda. And we are part of the Human Development Center for LSU Health New Orleans. We are Louisiana's USAID. We support inclusive education and community participation. We focus on programs all the way from early childhood all the way through community health. We are the Education Grades K-12 Initiative, Lassard. We provide direct services, professional development, interdisciplinary training, and we have lots of programs on our website that are all linked together. And if you look, our next slide shows some more of those programs that we have at the Human Development Center. Our team, Lassard, is just one of those projects, and we are Louisiana's only University Center of Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, which is what USAID stands for. Our disciplinary team consistently works together to find innovative ways to help districts, teachers, and students grow. Our team is made up of special educators, BCBAs, occupational therapists, school psychologists, school administrators, educational therapists, SLPs, early interventionists, and licensed professional counselors. I'll let Melinda introduce herself.
Thanks, Tracy. So my name is Melinda Luna. This is my 8th year at Lassard. Prior to joining the Lassard team, I was a special education teacher in St. Charles Parish. I have 2 children, as you can see on the slide. The oldest has a diagnosis of autism, so a lot of the strategies I talk about today are strategies that I've actually used with him at home, so personal experience, and I live in St. Bernard Parish.
And I'm Tracy O'Donnell, like I said before. I came from St. Tammany Parish before joining the Lassard team, and I was a district IEP facilitator. I loved working with families, helping families. They were the best for family advocates. I was an instructional coach, an interventionist, and started as a special education teacher and a high school teacher. This is my 2nd year at Lassard, and I live in Mid-City in New Orleans. So resources for you, this is our website. We have lots of online free resources. Melinda's going to talk a lot more about that later on. But if you go to our website, you can meet our team, you can look at our services, you can contact us. We have a feature called Ask Lassard. If you ask us a question for a classroom or any student needs, you can fill out this form and one of our facilitators will be back to you probably within 24 to 48 hours. A lot of the resources that Melinda's going to talk about are going to be on our website right there, what's circled. It says online resources. And when you scroll down to that, there will be resources that are for home environment, behavior, communication, and social. So there's 3 targeted outcomes for our training today. We want you to explore the characteristics of the autism spectrum disorder. We're going to talk a lot about that. We want you to recognize essential supports for individuals with ASD and related disabilities. And we want to help you identify some specific strategies that you can use with your own child. And so before we get started, we kind of want you to sort of pre-self-assess for yourself. I just want you to take a quick minute to think about what you already know about ASD and what you want to know about ASD. And again, if you have any questions that come up while I'm talking or Melinda is talking with our presentation, you want to just put that in the chat and we will be happy to answer them before we get off tonight. So a pretty good life. They say that a person just needs 3 things to be truly happy in this world: someone to love, something to do, and somewhere to go. And this should be the case for individuals with disabilities as well. So in order for this to happen, it's really essential that we teach the skills they need to lead a successful life. So where are they going to go after high school? Will they have the skills necessary to hold a job? Who are they going to love as they get older? And will they have the skills necessary to have a healthy relationship with another person? And most importantly, what will they do with their life? Will they have the skills to go to different places in the community, maybe join recreational sports teams with friends, or volunteer for somewhere that they're very passionate about? But one thing's for sure, if we want the individuals we work with to have a pretty good life, we need to make sure that they have the skills to make that happen. And that sort of starts with presumed competence. So to do our part in ensuring that the individual has a pretty good life, we must presume competence for all students. Presumed competence really means that we should assume that all students are competent and that they have the ability to learn, because to do otherwise would result in our limiting their exposure to learning, and it would result in harm. And this is something that we tell teachers, faculty members, administrators, families, in all of our trainings. We talk about how crucial this is for all of us and for all students. So if it turns out that we're wrong about a student's ability to learn some of the same materials that their peers are learning, that's okay, because we've probably learned a great deal about their skill levels and challenges, and we haven't harmed the student by presuming incompetence. That's why we call this the least dangerous assumption. However, the potential consequences of not presuming competence are much more dangerous to the student, because then they miss out on so many learning opportunities that could make a huge difference in their lives. This mother says it best.
Melinda, you can't be muted and play it.
Thanks for the tip. Yeah, the sound still isn't working.
I know it was working just a minute ago when we played a clip.
It was.
Okay. Tracy, you just want to summarize so we're not missing out on too much time?
Yeah, sure. And what the mom talks about in this video is really just how important it is that Cooper was listened to, and that teachers and people that were involved with Cooper really just helped him communicate, and how important this is for all of our students.
Sorry, just trying to switch between screens.
That's okay.
I'm glad I'm not the only one that has technical difficulties.
I'm glad that it's Melinda doing it because I would have much more difficulties. She is
Okay, we're
much.
good.
Okay. So we want to start with a couple of caveats. First, this information is provided to help you better understand and support individuals with ASD, and the content is not meant for diagnostic purposes. And second, the criteria for a medical diagnosis of ASD is different from the criteria for qualifying a student for special education services under the Autism Spectrum Disorder label. So we're going to talk about how they qualify and get that exceptionality through schools, not a medical diagnosis. So how often does autism occur in the United States? Well, according to the CDC, 1 in 36 children have been identified with ASD. It is 4 times more likely in boys, and it occurs in all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups. So the terms autism spectrum disorder and autism can be used interchangeably, and we're going to use both of them in this presentation. So autism spectrum disorder, or ASD, is a developmental disability that's characterized by deficits in social communication and interaction, along with restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interests, or activities. A developmental disability means that the symptoms are present in the early developmental period. Sometimes symptoms may not fully manifest until later due to increased social demands as the child gets older, or because the individuals learn strategies to compensate for areas of difficulty. These characteristics can cause significant difficulties in social, occupational, and other really important areas of functioning. So what do people think it looks like versus what it actually looks like? It's a spectrum or a continuum of characteristics. It's not linear like the depiction on the left. There are varying degrees of skill level within each core area. For example, an individual can be gifted in the area of cognition, but may have significant needs for support in language or sensory areas and organization. Another individual with autism may have good expressive language skills, but need lots of support to utilize that language appropriately in social situations. Some individuals may be hypersocial, like they talk too much, or stand too close, or touch too much, while others may resist even sharing space with other people. And as we talked about on the last slide, there's a wide variety of characteristics and skill levels. So aligned with this recognition, the American Psychiatric Association published levels of support in the DSM-5 in 2013. And that's where this is coming from. This way of referencing support levels by talking about support needs rather than referring to individuals on the spectrum as high functioning or low functioning is more descriptive and therefore helpful to providers and more respectful to people that are on the autism spectrum. So if you look at ASD level 1, that's requiring support. ASD level 2 is requiring substantial support, and ASD level 3 is requiring very substantial support. And regardless of what level your child may fall or a student may fall in this different 8, 1, 2, or 3 in this continuum, that does not mean that that is where they stay. So it is something that is very fluid. So although they may share some common challenges, individuals with ASD are individuals first and are unique with their own set of skills and needs for support. So we're going to spend some time talking about how the diagnosis of ASD is defined in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association, commonly referred to as the DSM. That is a mouthful. The diagnosis is made by identifying certain deficits that must be present for the diagnosis to be made. So before we do that, we're going to take a moment to talk about the strengths of people that are on the autism spectrum. So here's some strengths that are common to many, but not all individuals diagnosed with ASD. So when you're talking to schools or family members or doctors or anyone, we believe in a strengths-based approach. It is extremely important and crucial for every individual for you to understand, identify, and look for those strengths first. So here's some common ones. It's not everybody, not all, but very common to many students with ASD. They may have really great memory skills. They may recall specific things that you said days before. They may be early readers because they can recognize and remember words and letters as well as numbers, colors, shapes. They are really good with memory. Many can be very detail focused, which this can be positive and maybe negative because of hyper focus on details that will attract their attention. And so they may miss the big picture. Autistic individuals also communicate in a very honest and direct way. They say exactly what they mean. It may sometimes be characterized as rude, but it is not meant that way. They just say what they think, and they're very direct about it. It's almost like a no filter, honest approach. Most individuals with autism like sameness and routine, and they're able to learn and adhere to routines very quickly and easily. For this same reason, individuals with ASD frequently respond really well to rules to provide them with structure that helps them function in different environments and social situations. Many individuals with ASD have topics or activities that are highly preferred and will often have extensive knowledge on those areas or topics. Individuals on the spectrum seem to be able to separate emotionally from logical thinking and tease out the logic. This can be very helpful in decision making because they're not overly emotional. And people on the spectrum tend to be visual learners. Visual memory is a big strength. And that's why the use of visual supports is so important. And we're going to talk more about that later. But if you think about it, 90% of what students are learning in school, they're being told something by a teacher. And most of what we listen to and learn are auditory, whereas they are completely visual learners. Not all, but a lot. So I want you to think about someone that you know with ASD. And if you want to, type in the chat what one of their strengths are, or multiple strengths. It says to hosts and panelists. I don't know if anybody can read those messages. And if you can't, we're going to keep going and maybe we'll talk about the strengths afterwards. So the criteria for autism spectrum disorder. So these criteria are strictly from the DSM-V, which is what I had mentioned earlier. It's the most recent version of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, and it is published by the APA, the American Psychiatric Association. This is what psychiatrists, psychologists, and licensed medical and mental health professionals use to get their diagnoses. The individual must experience deficits in social communication and interaction and demonstrate restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior in order for there to be a diagnosis of autism. Deficits in these areas must be persistent, present in early childhood, cause clinically significant impairment in social, occupational, or other areas of current functioning. And again, in order to receive a diagnosis of ASD, an individual must exhibit behaviors in both areas that coexist. So we're going to talk about these individually. So social communication and interaction. Deficits must be in these three areas. So they must have deficits in all three areas. So what does that look like? In young children with ASD, the first thing noticed by parents is usually speech delay. For those who have speech, their speech may be echolalic, or scripted. In school-age children with speech, they may have difficulty with pragmatics or social use of language. For example, they may have an extensive vocabulary, but not know how to use it to ask if they can join a play activity or engage in a give and take conversation with others. Also, knowing how to repair communication breakdowns and understanding abstract concepts may be difficult for individuals with ASD, and that can cause issues. They may not understand when they're being teased or when someone is joking, using sarcasm or idioms. These deficits in language usually persist into adulthood. And now we're going to break these down even more. So next slide. Social reciprocity is the subtle social dance that we do. It's that back and forth interaction that takes place when we encounter someone. Most of us engage in it and we don't even think about it. It's sharing our focus or joint attention and responding in kind. It's knowing how and when to initiate or respond to the social interactions with others. So for example, if we encounter someone sad or crying, we likely mirror their feelings with our own expression or our approach and our words. Some social reciprocity challenges that might be demonstrated include things like variances in their ability to engage in back and forth conversations. This could look like a failure to respond when their name is called or one-sided conversations. Individuals on the spectrum may enjoy engaging in like tells or monologues instead of sharing conversations where they spend time informing you about a topic they really enjoy talking about. They can sometimes show little or no interest in your thoughts about what they're saying, so they may not share the stage with you during conversations. Children with ASD frequently have difficulty sharing interests, initiating, responding to social interactions. They might bring you something to look at or show you for something for approval to get a response from you. But a child with autism may not respond to like a social smile. They may seek out others for acknowledgement or for that like excited response individuals and adults frequently provide to children to show that excitement. And they may prefer to just play by themselves and not engage with others at all. They may interact with family or peers to gain a preferred object, but the intent of the interaction is not for social purposes. Early social characteristics also can include a lack of joint attention. Joint attention refers to things like eye gaze, following a point, using gestures such as pointing. In school-age children, teachers may notice difficulties in peer interactions. They may have difficulties doing cooperative games. They may have a few or no friends. When friendships are developed, they typically revolve around the student's special interest. It's also hypothesized that students with ASD lack theory of mind or the awareness that others have their own thoughts and feelings. And this can lead to a lack of empathy, sharing, and awareness. As adults, it can look like a lack of friendships and can be barriers to independent living and work placements. So nonverbal communication, that's when the individual will exhibit deficits in the use, awareness, and interpreting of nonverbal communicative behaviors, such as difficulty conveying or reading facial expressions and body language, abnormalities in eye contact, use of and understanding of gestures, such as following a point or nodding to indicate understanding or agreement. Research suggests that 93% of communication consists of 55% nonverbal, 38% vocal, and only 7% spoken words. So if an individual's not watching for and interpreting nonverbal cues, they're missing most of the message that's being conveyed. So likewise, if an individual's not utilizing all of these nonverbal communication strategies, the listener can also misinterpret that message that they're trying to send. And then the last one is going to be relationships. So sometimes this is we would say like their ability to read the room or their social adeptness. Deficits with that can impact the person's ability to have those relationships. Individuals with ASD may communicate in the same way regardless of the setting or with whom they're speaking. So they may have difficulty matching their behavior to the situation or the environment. And the vocabulary we use, our tone and volume are different if we're speaking to like a teacher in the library versus a friend on the playground, and students with ASD cannot make that distinction a lot of times. Imaginative play, that's when a child utilizes their imagination to role play things that they've experienced or would like to experience. It's really open-ended with no rules or results. And this kind of unstructured play may need to be taught to individuals with autism, and it's very important as symbolic play helps develop creativity, flexibility, perseverance, and is a way to bond with others and improve social and language skills. So when you have difficulty sharing focus, attention, and interests, reading and utilizing nonverbal communication, and an inability to engage back and forth and for social conversations, you tend to have difficulty forming those relationships. We're going to go to the slide that says the second category for a deficit, which is restricted repetitive patterns of behavior. So let's break that down. So deficits in 2 of the following areas must be present to meet the criteria for ASD. So stereotyped or repetitive motor movements, use of objects or speech, insistence on sameness, inflexible adherence to routines, ritualized patterns of nonverbal and verbal behaviors, not highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity or focus, over or under reactivity to sensory input or unusual interests. So let's break those 4 things down. So what does that include? Stereotyped or repetitive behaviors can include motor movements, the use of objects, or speech patterns. So you may see unusual hand patterns like finger flicking, hand posturing, like keeping their hands curled or fisted or hanging limply. Other patterns that you may see could be toe walking, waving fingers in front of their eyes, spinning, rocking, lining up objects or spinning a wheel or part of a toy. Peculiar phrases, especially from like really popular TV shows, or they can engage in echolalic speech patterns. The next one is insistence on sameness. So that's where our difficulty with transitions comes in. These can be transitions between activities, locations, or even people. They can be especially challenging if they involve moving from a preferred to a non-preferred activity. Same with that location or person. If they're going from preferred to non-preferred, that transition can be challenging. So they create routines and rituals within their environments as coping mechanisms to create a sense of predictability and to stay calm. It's often their way of making sense out of an environment that's confusing to them. So examples may include that you drive a certain route to and from school, and any change in that route creates anxiety or inconsistence on wearing the same clothes or shoes or only eating certain foods. It can be how they interact with people or objects, such as a need to have everything in order or lined up or in the same place at the same time. They may ask the same question as a way of greeting someone, like, hey, what shampoo do you use? And they ask, hey, what shampoo do you use to everyone that they meet? So also fixed interests. So this may manifest as attachments to unusual objects or excessive focus to perseverative interest, like when they perseverate on something. This is things, it can be anything: light bulbs, pipe cleaners, batteries, ribbon, knowing every fact about the Titanic or baseball statistics. I had a student that was attached to a specific cereal box, and he really liked to carry that with him. And when the company drastically changed the design of the box, it was extremely difficult for everybody involved to like find a substitute because he really liked that particular box. So even if the object's not unusual, like a blanket or a stuffed animal for young children, the attachment may be so strong that it interferes with learning and social interaction. So these excessive interests often result in difficulty with transitioning these learners to less preferred sort of teacher-initiated activities. So they may appear to be like obsessive, and they can lead to high levels of anxiety when attempts are made to engage them in something else. 4th area is going to be repetitive patterns of behavior. So, and that's going to be present in over or under reaction to sensory input. So some individuals may engage in unusual behaviors such as smelling things, licking objects or people, rubbing certain textures or materials that they really prefer, spinning, watching twinkling lights, moving objects such as a fan blade, or making noises. They can be over or under sensitive for pain or temperature or different how different textures are, and that can lead to safety concerns, especially if a student has a really high tolerance for pain. And there can be real sensitivity to noise, bells ringing, classroom noises. Those things can be overwhelming, and they can result in students covering their ears or eloping from whatever that environment is. They may have adverse responses to certain clothing and have a difficult time switching from pants to shorts or wearing a particular type of sock. Food textures and tastes can result in someone with ASD eating the same thing over and over every day. So general assumptions. What are some general assumptions that are made about students with ASD? First one is that they are visual learners. Visual learners prefer using images, and they see pictures in their mind instead of words. Words are gone once spoken, but visual supports remain, and they can be utilized for a variety of purposes, such as reminding students of rules, routines, or steps to complete an activity. Another general assumption: students with ASD are literal learners. Figurative language is part of daily language and social communication, but it can be confusing to some students with ASD. So eavesdrop on a conversation between friends and you may hear verbal irony or sarcasm used. Educators often use hyperbole, metaphors, similes, and other forms of figurative language in their instruction. Literature is full of figurative language, and the consequence of not understanding figurative language is that lack of understanding can have an adverse impact on the individual's personal relationships and their participation in social activities or even academic achievement. So our previous general assumption was that students with ASD are visual learners, or that they see images in their mind. So if someone says it's raining cats or dogs outside, the individual with ASD may picture in their mind cats and dogs falling from the sky. So it's important to recognize that students with ASD may be giving a literal interpretation to many instructions and comments that are made during the day, which potentially leads to social misunderstandings and academic confusion. So just being aware of this and taking an active approach to teaching the difference between literal and non-literal language can enhance their social understanding and participation, and it can prevent them from missing out on important academic instruction. Number 3 is that students with ASD need consistency and predictability. There are no surprises with that. And I will now turn it over to Melinda, who's going to do some essential support strategies.
All right, thank you, Tracy. So when putting together this presentation, I have a problem with stopping because I want to add all the good stuff. So I'm going to kind of zoom through the rest because it is just a lot of examples of what you can do at home to help your child. But if you have any questions whatsoever, make sure to write them in the chat box and Tracy will monitor that. All right, essential support strategies. Those are just those good teaching practices that help all of us. We use them every single day when we're out and about in the community or even at our own house. Going to the grocery store, we look for labels. Driving, we see the stop sign. Going to a fast food restaurant, you're going through visual boundaries just so we don't hit other cars. Sticky notes, shopping lists, Google Map, a calendar in your phone. Those are all examples of visual supports. Priming. Priming is just a way we prepare ourselves for something that may be difficult. Especially living in southern Louisiana, we always like to prime ourselves whenever there's a hurricane. We like to prepare. What do we need to do? Do we need to look for a place to evacuate to? Do we need to go to the store and get a bunch of food in case we stay home? I myself, I'm a very picky eater. So anytime I go out to a restaurant, a new restaurant, I always prime myself of the menu just to make sure that I will like something. Because if I go there and I don't like something, I will be very upset. Communication. We all communicate in different ways. Even if we're not verbal speakers, we may text message, we may communicate using different emojis. And of course, social media. That's a way that we're always communicating just by posting pictures. And then reinforcement. Reinforcement is why we do what we do. We go to work every day to get a paycheck. We take that paycheck and buy something that is preferred to us, like a pair of shoes, a purse, or going out for coffee or favorite meal. And then even just that verbal praise or recognition. If your boss sends you an email, hey, you're doing a phenomenal job, great work today. That's reinforcement. It's why we do what we do. So now we're going to break down some visual supports on what it could look like at home for your child. When you think about visual supports, there are 3 different types: boundaries, cues, and schedules. The definition of visual supports, it's just any material that illustrates important information, facilitates transitions, convey expectations, provides understanding and predictability. And all 3 of those can really help with that. So first, let's talk about visual boundaries. Visual boundaries, it's a support that just makes a designated area more obvious. So when you think about boundaries, it helps us know, where do I sit? What's off limits? Where do I go? What's available? When my son was younger, just thinking about safety reasons, he would constantly run into the street. So I just took chalk, and every few days I would draw that line by the sidewalk of the street. So he would know, and we would practice like, hey, when we see this line, we need to stop. And eventually over time, the line faded away and he knew, okay, right before that drained, I know I need to stop to keep him safe. When we go into schools and classrooms, teachers are trying to work on sitting on the rug or just sitting in a designated seat. And that's something you can also work on at home. When he was younger, this is Logan, when he was maybe 3 or 4, they were trying to teach him to sit on the rug at school with his square. So we practiced at home. Again, if I had to run to the bedroom to get something and I want to make sure he's safe in that moment, I could teach him, like, okay, you need to stay inside of your square. I'll be right back. And he knew, okay, I don't leave this area. I stay in this area. This is another example of what it looks like in the classroom and what it could look like at home. You can use tape or visual boundaries just to help the individual understand their personal space. So teachers may use this at tables where several students are seated, just so the student knows, okay, everything inside of these lines, that's my stuff. I can't go and touch somebody else's stuff in their tape. So thinking about eating at home, you can use the same kind of setup if you have a child that likes to take food off of your plate or a sibling's plate, and teach them, okay, this is your area. Whenever you're eating, your hands need to stay inside this area, your plate. You can't reach out of this area. And you can also use it for safety concerns as well. If your child is a climber and you want to keep them away from hot items like the oven and stove, put that tape around that area. And again, teach them. It's all about practicing and modeling how it's supposed to work. Like, okay, when you see this line, that means stop. And over time, again, it's not going to happen overnight, but over time, after practice and practice, they will learn to stop right before that line. So you're not going to have the climbing at home. They're not going to be touching the hot stove. And it's all about keeping them safe. All right, so next we have visual schedules. And a visual schedule is a tool that provides a child with information about the sequence of events to occur. A schedule answers what's next, are there any changes, when is a break, how long is math homework? And when you think about different schedules, there are 3 different types. So you have a class or a daily schedule, an individual schedule, and an activity schedule. But when you think about schedules, there are different pictures or icons that you can use. You really don't need to have the fancy visual supports program to make your own visual support at home. You can just use real objects, or you can use photographs of real objects. I love using my phone and taking pictures of the real thing happening, of Logan sitting in his square, him sitting at the table eating dinner, just because that's easier for them to relate to. You can use drawings, you can use stick figures, just random clip art images, and then if they don't need pictures, you can just use text. So here are some examples of different schedules. First is a first then schedule, and it's so simple. It simply reminds the individual what they're working for. It increases motivation for completion of a less preferred task, and there's not one right or wrong way to use a first then board. You can use it on a note card, you can use it on a whiteboard, and I'm going to show you different examples of how you can use the icon hierarchy. So this is one that's on our website. So when the timer rings, then it's time to put your iPad away. iPad time is over. When we were potty training, that was challenging. I'm sure many of you can relate. And I had to be very specific on this visual support of what he needed to do in the toilet in order to earn what he was working for. Haircuts, that was a big struggle for us too. So this was a free app, Pic Collage. I took my 2 pictures, uploaded them in the app, and then that was my first then board. So it wasn't necessarily something I printed in the moment. It was something that I really put together in an app within 3 minutes. So first we do our haircut, then we get to go jump. Like I said, you can use objects. So first we need to brush our teeth, then you can watch TV, or you can just use text. First math, then iPad. So next we have activity schedules, and that simply breaks down the task into steps. It helps the individual pace themselves with an activity. It promotes independence, which I know is the goal for all of your children. And then it lets them know that there is an end in sight. So if we're teaching them the steps to take out the trash because we want them to do this independently, it's not something we want to do the rest of our lives. We can make an activity schedule showing them first you pull out the trash bag, then you tie the trash bag, then you put the trash bag in the big outside trash can, put the new trash bag in the trash can, wash your hands, and then you're all done. So as you can see, it's breaking down the task into steps. They're able to kind of pace themselves throughout. It's not a speed contest. It's promoting independence because after using this several times, the goal is that they can do all of this by themselves with minimal support from you. And it shows them, hey, once I wash my hands, I'm done. These are some other examples. Again, morning time, I'm sure, is chaotic for everybody, just trying to get out the house, get to work, get to school. So instead of the verbal reminders over and over again, did you eat your breakfast? Did you brush your teeth? You can have an activity schedule, just structuring that morning time for them, just showing them everything they need to do to encourage independence as much as possible. This is a daily afternoon schedule that Logan has at home, just because every day is kind of different. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, this is our schedule. He has karate. Thursday, we don't have karate, so that schedule is a little different. And as Tracy mentioned, like they thrive on routine and predictability. So this is pretty much our same routine every single day. And if I try to do bath time before cereal, oh no, it's not going to happen. Like he will remind me, no, first I need to take a bath, then I eat cereal. Yeah, he likes his cereal before bed. This is a checklist for maybe an older individual. Again, it's all about promoting that independence. And so they have their checklist of everything they need to do in the morning, everything they need to do in the afternoon or bedtime. Thinking about some things they can do around the house, such as cleaning the kitchen. You can take that task and break it down into steps and make it fun. This is just a Pringles can that I washed out and spray painted. So once they're done with the icon, they can put it inside the Pringles can and you're able to keep track of all the pieces. This is a pill sorter. But instead of pills, as you can see, there's Fruit Loops inside of it. So in the afternoon, when they're doing their homework, every time they complete that baby step, they can open and get that small reward that they're working for. And again, our handy dandy paint strips from Home Depot or Walmart or Lowe's. I love how it's color coded. So you're able to take that big activity and break it down into steps for them. And again, they can see that end in sight. Like once I do number 4, then I'm done. And you will get a copy of these slides, just so you'll have pictures of all of this if you want to try it at home. Going to the doctor was a huge deal as well when he was younger, just because it's so routine, but then he struggled the most whenever they had to look in his ears. So we created a schedule that I would bring to the appointments with us so he could see, okay, the doctor or the nurse is going to do steps 1 through 4, and then it's time for her to look in your ears. It wasn't easy, but I was able to prepare him. He knew it was coming. So that was helpful to an extent. And then he could see, okay, once she checks my private part and I can pull up my pants, then I'm done. We're out of here. And just thinking about using supports in the community, you can use an activity schedule when going to the grocery store, such as first I need to get the cart, then I need to shop for these items, then I need to find this aisle, then I need to pay, get change and receipt, and then go on the bus or get in the car, and then I'm done shopping with mom. And just thinking about other schedules that you can use over the summer, that is a hard time for a lot of these kids because that's a big schedule change from going from a structured environment at school every day to a home environment where it may not be as structured. So we had a weekly schedule at the bottom of our refrigerator that we would check in every day. Okay, Monday we stayed home. Tuesday we went to camp. Wednesday we had therapy. Thursday we went to camp. Friday we had therapy. And Saturday and Sunday we were home. But every day, because it was constantly changing daily, I was able to prepare him for that. And then this was a resource that Tracy just put on our Facebook page and website yesterday. But with all of the school breaks coming up for Thanksgiving and Christmas, you can use a monthly schedule to prime them of when they have school and when they're off of school. So next, let's talk about visual cues. You can use visual cues, which is simply a visual reminder, that's a sticky note for us, to help them organize things in your house. So I have these on the drawers of my in my son's bedroom. So that way when I say, okay, go get your socks, he'll go to his room, find the sock drawer, get his socks. Again, it's all about promoting that independence. Organizing his animals, because that was a huge thing when he was younger. So he would make sure they all went into the right home when cleaning up. Thinking about chores around the house. If you want them to keep track of their dirty and light clothes and dirty dark clothes, or just dirty and clean clothes in general, you can label that with a visual cue outside of the laundry basket, and they would know, okay, light clothes go in here, dark clothes go in here. And Tracy talked about how a lot of individuals with autism struggle with transitions. So a transition is simply any change that happens within an activity, from one activity to another, or from one environment to another. So just leaving the house, going to school, that's a transition. Because when you think about a transition, it requires you to stop what you're doing, begin something new, and possibly move from one location to another. That's a lot of changes happening in a short time frame. So when that does happen, you would want to use a timer just to really help facilitate and guide the individual with that transition. So it helps students know a specific start and end time. It can be easily paired with a schedule to help the student pace themselves. This is one that we have on our website, a countdown timer, and you can use a clothespin, a sticky note, an arrow, something just to help them see, okay, now it's go time. Let's just say they're outside playing. When the time is almost up, you would move whatever you're using to manipulate the support to the next color. So you're moving it to yellow. Okay, time is up. Let's move it to red. Now it's time to stop. So again, the transition is still happening, but you're preparing them that it's coming and it's going to be ending soon. This is a timer that I recommend. They have a free version and a paid version. It's called Children's Countdown Timer. If you download it in the App Store, it's like a little rubber duck. But you can use it for all ages. And this is kind of the timer in action. It starts green, then it kind of gets gold to brownish, and then it goes to red whenever the timer is almost done. But you can also upload your own pictures as the background of the timer. So let's just say the individual's working for the iPad. So you could take a picture of their iPad and show them, okay, whenever the timer goes up after homework time, then you can earn your iPad. Priming is something that we recommend often, especially when using visual supports. And again, priming is just something that you do to prepare the individual for something that they're going to have difficulty with. You're exposing them to information before they occur, and you can prime them for upcoming activities, events, and transitions. So these are some priming strategies. You can review your child's schedule with them at the beginning of the day, noting any changes. So if you're checking them out of school for therapy or a doctor's appointment, tell them that morning, because if you just show up at school and check them out, it may not be pretty whenever they come to the office. Review rules and expectations of different environments. I do that a lot, thinking about going to a birthday party. There's a lot of unspoken rules that you need to go over before going in that type of environment. Like, you don't go and open somebody else's presents. You don't go and touch the cake before the birthday person blows out their candles. So a lot of those things you can go over to prepare any behaviors from happening in the first place. Review tools and strategies for self-management. So if this happens, remember, we need to take 10 deep breaths and then prime them about upcoming activities and transitions. Thinking about this morning, the weather was terrible down here in the New Orleans area. So I try to prime my son on the way to school. If I know the weather's going to be bad that day, odds are he's not going outside for recess. This kid lives for recess. Like he would only go to school if he could do recess all day long. So I would prime him, okay, remember the weather's probably going to rain around lunchtime. So you're probably not going to go outside for recess. It's going to be an indoor recess. The teacher probably already does that, but I'm just giving him a heads up, like it's probably going to happen. So just be prepared. Thinking about those big transitions whenever they're moving schools or transitioning from elementary to middle school, you can use a transition book, and this is something you can reach out to your child's school to help you with. But whenever he was transitioning from therapy to elementary school, we made a simple book. Going to big school is just pictures of the front office, pictures of the administrator, pictures of his new teacher, pictures of the new classroom, cafeteria, outside playground, just all of these new environments that he needed to be familiar with before the school year started. Thinking about going new places in the community or even field trips, somewhere new that they've never been. YouTube can be your best friend because odds are they have a video on there somewhere for everything that you need. So if you're going to the aquarium this weekend, there's a lot of things happening at the aquarium. So you can play the video for your child so that way they know what to expect. They're going to walk under this huge tunnel where they see stingrays and sharks. They're going to be able to pet a stingray. That's terrifying, but you can talk about it before it actually occurs, before you get there. We're not going to watch the video because of time, but I will leave them in here just so you can watch them later. Going to the dentist, that was another thing that was just horrible for us when he was younger. But this is a video that I found on YouTube. Let's go to the dentist, social story, and it talks about what to expect when going to the dentist. What do they do for a cleaning? Where do you lay down? What will the dentist do? And it's all about priming and preparing to prevent those challenging behaviors from occurring. Like priming really does make a huge, huge difference. And this is Logan when he was probably 2. And guys, when I tell you that I've been using these strategies with him since he's been 2, that's the truth. So we've always used timers. We still use timers to this day, and he's 8. But it's just funny because he knows what the timer meant. So you're gonna see his response whenever I pulled it out. Logan, when timer goes beep beep, iPad is all done. Logan, when timer goes beep beep. I was trying so hard to get a video to show to another parent, but at that point he's like, I know you're going to take my iPad away, so why even wait the extra 30 seconds? Just take it now. And he was fine. But I mean, when you do a strategy like that on a regular basis, it just shows you it makes a huge difference. All right, I am going to skip over these sections for the sake of time, but you will have all of these slides with the information and the visuals. And if you have any questions whatsoever, you can reach out to me or Tracy, and we can send you the support if it's not on our website, or we can answer any specific questions you have. But this is something else on our website, a preference assessment. We've talked about things that the individual is working on. We didn't talk about reinforcement a lot when it comes to your child, but we know a lot of your kids, they're motivated by something. And I can't stress this enough. Like, you know them best. You know them better than anybody, better than any teacher, professional at their school. Utilize this preference assessment, because if they're struggling at school and they're willing to work for something, download this off of our website, print it out, and write every little detail that you can think about that the teacher would need to know to try these things at school. If there's one specific YouTube video and a time they really like it from 1 minute and 30 seconds to 1 minute and 50 seconds, put that on the paper and send it to the teacher. I know they're going to appreciate it and it would make a huge difference with their learning in the school environment. So as a quick wrap up, essential support strategies helps everybody, not just students with autism, not just students with related disabilities. It helps every single person that exists on this planet. And I gave you examples of what that looks like in our day-to-day. So we talked about visual supports and priming, and then your homework is to review this presentation once you get it and look at the examples for communication supports and reinforcement strategies. So now we want to know, what did you learn from this training? I know that was a lot of information to cram into 60 minutes. I told you I had a problem with adding too much. So put it in the chat box if you don't mind. What is something that you learned, something that you can easily take away from this training and implement at home with your child, or something that you learned about autism that you didn't know before and it just really makes sense? Like, oh, my child is doing these things, so now I know why. And then it is 7:57. So if some of you want to unmute your mic and kind of share out what is your biggest takeaway from this training. And I guess that kind of goes with what did you learn too?
And if you'll raise your hand down on the react button, press that react button, and you can press raise hand, and I will open your mic for you. I don't think they can unmute themselves, so.
Oh, okay.
Funny story. My son has autism. He's 26. I accidentally primed him for a road trip a couple of weeks ago, and he wasn't going. It was terrible. My daughter and I were going on a little weekend getaway, and my husband had to work that day, and I took my son down to the school where he works. And I had already put the suitcases in the car. And when we got to the school to drop my son off with my son got really mad. He had seen me put the suitcases in the car. And normally that means we're going on a trip. And he does love road trips. So now I owe him a road trip because he came unglued. That was really sad. I was very upset about that.
In the chat box, we have a parent that said, I learned that I'm not alone, and you are so not alone. I promise you that. You just need to find your person, find another person that you can connect with that just really understands what you're going through. Let's see. I learned different cues to use with my son that I haven't thought of. I really like the timer app. We use timers all the time, but I think that app will be great. Perfect. All right. And I know she already put a survey in the chat box, so we'll just get any feedback you have from her. We'll hang on for a bit if you have any questions. If not, here's our email addresses, and feel free to email us whenever. We're very responsive with our emails, and we can send you any information or resources that you're looking for. Or if you just want a person to talk to, you can email us too.
We had some comments while the presentation was going on. We were chit-chatting in the box. One, I said that my son is totally aware of where he is in space at all times, and he has significant intellectual disability and is a non-speaker besides having autism. But he lets us know if we have not gone the right way. Like if we pass by the street that goes to our house, because we have to run to the store before we go home, his head whips around. He's like, "What are you doing?" When we go on a long trip, and I mean, we can be gone for a week. When we get back to the New Orleans area, he knows it and he gets really animated and excited. So he has that, we call him Rand McNally because he has that, Google Maps now. He has that in his head. And Jessica said she noticed that her son does that as well. Christina said her daughter has a great sense of humor and also loves language. She is a non-speaker, but the interest that she has taken in foreign languages amazes me. She even learned to change the language on Disney Plus. And my son also, I chimed in, has a tremendous sense of humor for someone who doesn't speak. And you mentioned too that receptive language is affected because a lot of folks with autism don't pick up on the social cues and the visual cues and everything. But at the same time, if you turn that around, they don't necessarily have to use the spoken word to communicate. Because I have learned so much about my son is so expressive for someone who has never talked. He is so expressive, and we almost never have to guess what he's thinking or what he wants or what he's laughing about. It's really interesting that he is so tuned in somehow with like this parallel universe or something. I mean, he just really picks up on things that we don't. And we've learned so much about nonverbal communication from him. Keisha asked, can theater techniques help enhance social skills in children with communication and emotional challenges? Any comments on that?
So as far as like theater I think is wonderful for any and all students, honestly, because they get to explore and experience, how to make faces and how to project different things. Do I think theater techniques would be great? Totally. Am I really sure about, is that going to, it would depend a lot on the student, right? Like, I think that's kind of more, I say try everything, like try anything and everything. Don't ever turn something away.
You never know if they like it or if they're going to engage with it until you try.
Absolutely. And then I see, how do you handle an adult child that has some intentional disruptive behavior? So that's a great question. The first thing is you want to know what the function of that behavior is. And once you can determine what that function is by looking at what happens right before that behavior, the antecedent to the behavior, and then what happens right after the consequence of the behavior. Not necessarily consequence like, do they get a reward or do they get a negative consequence, but what happens right after, to try to find out what the function of that intentional disruptive behavior is. And then once you know what the function is, and then you can work towards either utilizing reinforcement. Does the child even know that their behavior is disruptive? And we would have to get real specific, but Chris, if you want to email us more specifics, contact us outside of this. We will be happy to give you some more information, kind of break it down and give you some strategies to try that are very specific and unique. But I would start with looking at what's the function of that behavior, and then what's that function, what's a replacement behavior that they could do that's easy, that would get them, that would satisfy the same need that they're trying to have met, because all behavior is a form of communication. Can you email a screencast? I don't know what a screencast is, but yes, whatever that is, that's a great way. What's the best way to address inappropriate comments that are seeking attention in school, that are attention seeking in school and at home? So how else could they, inappropriate comments, if you can be more specific, like, would it be that they need to make different comments to get that same attention? What else could be done so that the student could get the attention without making an inappropriate comment? Because the inappropriate comments are probably to get that attention. So what could they do to get that attention without the inappropriate comments? Like, could there be a signal? Could there be a way to give them the attention? And when you talk about in school, at home, is it with other peers? Is it with adults? And that also can adjust and change what you do with what sort of strategy that you want to put in there. Also, social stories are really, really great. We have a visual called a mental filter, where if the student isn't sure if that's an inappropriate comment, like, we can write it down and we can talk about, is that really inappropriate? And that's something that you keep to yourself, versus these are things that you say instead. And they can serve the same purpose with peers seeking attention and wanting to fit in. So it depends on how old. So I do think that is a behavior that Non-disabled peers probably engage in as well. So I guess we could talk more about how could we get that attention. Wanting to fit in, I think, is a very typical thing of all students, and they all want to fit in. So how could we help that student feel included? Melinda, you may have
Um,
something more specific.
yes, and y'all may hear kids screaming in the background. That's why I muted myself. But I recently worked with a school in New Orleans on implementing a peer support program. And to help facilitate some of those lunchtime conversations, we created something called the lunch chat. And we actually have an example on our website. And it's just like simple conversation starters. Just to make sure everybody's talking about appropriate topics. And it was silly things like, would you rather be a giraffe or an ant? Why? What's your favorite restaurant? Tell me why. And again, it's just structured conversation starters. So they're still getting the peer attention, but they're all talking about things that's somewhat appropriate for that age group. So you can bring the idea, share the example with your child's teacher to see what they think, but they could also make like their own lunch chat based on his interests, just to make sure he would want to have that back and forth exchange with a peer about it.
You could also practice at home. That would be like I guess the theater technique. You could role play at home with what would be appropriate to say in lieu of the inappropriate comment to get that attention. I have parents that I work with that have this issue. The school has a difficult time handling inappropriate comments in the classroom, not understanding how to address, and the child gets in trouble for the behavior. So not understanding how to address and the child gets in trouble for the behavior. So the student gets in trouble for making an inappropriate comment. I'm guessing is what you're saying. Yeah, they get sent out of the classroom or written up. So again, that could be it could be valuable to spend some time role playing what appropriate comments would be for that. It could also be worth it to set up some type of a peer support or peer study with students in the class with this particular student so that they have opportunities to talk in the class. If it sounds like you're working with parents that are struggling with the school. And so I wonder, are there other students that are the same peer age that are making inappropriate comments and that are saying things? And is it just that they're not saying it at that time, or they're not saying it as loud as this student is? And maybe they have, do they do things like social stories? Do they utilize counselors? Some schools have culture teams where they specifically address that in groups. It sounds like that's a classroom management issue as well. So like if I was a parent of a student that kept getting in trouble for saying inappropriate things, I would suggest to the teacher, could we set up some type of a peer that they could be buddies with, that they could sit next to? Could we set up some type of like a lunch chat like Melinda was talking about? Could we, what comments do you want? Like what is the appropriate comment? And let's try to substitute the inappropriate comment with an appropriate one and still get the same thing. Like, because if the student doesn't ever get an opportunity to talk with their peers during the classroom setting, I can see where that's probably frustrating for everyone, not just that student, if that makes any sense.
Unfortunately, some of the experience that I've had, and stories that I've heard from others is that the kids with the IEPs who are in inclusion situations will a lot of times get called out for things uh, that other kids do and don't get called out. You know what I'm saying? They just don't want to deal with the kids with the IEPs or whatever. They have this knee-jerk reaction to any kind of speaking out or anything like that. And instead of handling it as they would any other kid, they have that reaction, and suddenly it's a huge ordeal. So a lot of times the kids who don't have IEPs or 504s, they just get handled in the classroom as part of classroom management, but our kids don't necessarily get that same respect.
Yeah, and so I would maybe in that I would definitely meet with the teacher for sure and ask what happens with other students, because it sounds like this is a student that's either in like junior high or high school, or of an age above like elementary. And if that's the case, it sounds like he's doing very natural, normal behavior, right, to get attention. And while I get that you can't interrupt class all of the time, like to me, it would be more of a classroom management situation. He can't be the only student in the classroom. Like I think it sounds to me like he can't be the only student in the classroom that interrupts the teacher or makes a comment.
Any other questions or comments before we sign off? I did put the link for our little survey, our feedback survey, in the chat box. If you guys have one that you need, a specific one that you need, though, I'm happy to email that out. I think our folks wouldn't mind doing that, even if they've already done mine. But if you need that, let me know. And
Thank
again,
you.
if you need a certificate of attendance, please do complete the little survey, and you can request it in there, and I will be happy to send that to you at the end of the week. All right. Well, ladies, thanks again so much. I appreciate your time and your expertise, both personal and professional. It's been a great evening, and everybody, this is recorded. It'll be on our website in a few days. So if you need to refer back to it or send other folks to it, that's where it will be. And it will be under our recorded trainings under our training tab. All right. Thanks again. Y'all have a great night, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah.